Okay, so for the rest of this class, there is this deployment section at the end. That's like totally out of the scope of Angular. It's just sort of there if you want to like look into it and get this thing up. There are a couple things that you need to keep in mind, but it doesn't really have anything to do with Angular. Um, so that's pretty much it. And of course, like create an update, they're right here as well. So for the rest of the class, I'm just wondering like, yeah, what questions you guys have about what we went over today, what we went over just now, Angular in general, homework, whatever. Marie.
So for our next project, do we have to incorporate Rails like this, or can we just, have a bit?
You know, I actually don't remember, and I don't want to say anything because I'm worried I'll get it wrong. So the source of truth is in the Project 3 repo, so I would just look there. There are probably still some changes being made to it, though. So keep an eye about that. Yeah, it's going to keep being updated, so it's probably not going to be official until like tomorrow afternoon, honestly.
So in the real world, so they use Angular with Rails, that's kind of one of the things to use.
Sort of. And so one thing that came up a lot in the other class was like, when would you actually do this? Like, when would you actually do Angular on Rails? And there's, like everything in programming, there's not really a right answer. What I would encourage all of you guys to do when you go out and start interviewing for things is anticipate questions where you're asked your opinion. So for instance, I have this app. Should I make it on Rails or should I make it on Angular on Rails? Defend your choice. You might get a question like that. When people ask you a question like that, they're not looking for a right answer because there isn't one. What they're looking for is you to make an informed opinion. So for instance, for a question like that, I might say, like, pro Angular would be like, well, I'm choosing to do Angular on Rails because Angular is, I prefer working with JavaScript. Angular lets me avoid page refreshes, which makes for a more seamless user experience, something like that. Whereas an argument against Angular might be, I'm less comfortable with JavaScript. Rails already takes care of all these routes for me, so adding on Angular, that's just an additional layer of complication, something like that. But there's not really a right answer. The important thing, though, is just have an opinion. Even if they disagree with your opinion, at least it shows that you're informed about what all this stuff is. And you may sort of feel like you're bullshitting it, but whatever. What do you think every job ever is? And unfortunately, programming isn't that much different. So yeah, with all this stuff, I mean, there's no right answer, but that doesn't mean you can't act as if there is a right answer. Yeah, I mean, maybe you'll be asked about like tabs versus spaces, like which do you prefer and why. That's something where it really doesn't make any difference, but that doesn't stop programmers from arguing about it all day long. So just have an opinion, and that's something for you to consider as we continue on in this class. Is like, what we would really like to see you guys doing is making informed decisions about how you create your app. You're already doing it even if you're not aware of it, but you're already doing like, oh, well, I should do this as a CSS animation instead of a jQuery. You may not even really think about it, but you're making that decision consciously for some reason. And so when you go into your project or wherever, try to be aware of these decisions you're making and see if you can figure out why you're making those decisions. It could just be, I'm doing Rails because I'm more comfortable in Ruby. Perfectly adequate answer. But see if you can find why you're choosing to do all these things. Why you do things is just as important as how well you actually do them, I would say. So that's probably a much longer answer than you wanted, but I don't even remember what your question was.